Welcome to Mighty Married Moms. Join us at our kitchen table twice a week as the Mighty Married Moms, Debbie, Linda, Wendy,
invite spectacular guests to weigh in on staying sexy, vibrant, and healthy,
building marriages with soul-satisfying connection, raising happy, healthy, successful kids. Conversations with Mighty Married Moms will bring you closer to the life you really want. Episode 89. Hi, this is Wendy Williams, and marriage happiness is way possible. ConnectAgain.org is very happy to sponsor Mighty Married Moms. We are partners in bringing you closer to the life you really want. Visit us today for marriage boosts at ConnectAgain.org. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mighty Married Moms. Today, we have the distinct privilege of being able to introduce you to Dr. Jeffrey Bernstein. He's a psychologist with over 25 years experience specializing in child, adolescent, couples, and family therapy. He holds a PhD in counseling psychology from the State University of New York, Albany, and completed his postdoc internship at the University of Pennsylvania Counseling Center. He's appeared twice on the Today Show, Court TV as an expert advisor, CBS Eyewitness News Philadelphia, 10 Philadelphia, NBC, and Public Radio. And he's got a bunch of books. I'll just tell you what they're called. We'll put them in the show notes as well. 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child, which I have read and can highly recommend. 10 Days to a Less Distracted Child, Liking the Child You Love, and Why Can't You Read My Mind? Dr. Jeff, thank you so much. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, his website is drjeffonline.com. Welcome. We're really glad to have you here.
Very honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is great. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about, how you got to doing what you're doing now? What was the background? What led to you being in this position?
Well, initially, I always wanted to be a dentist, actually, and I realized that I don't have the manual dexterity or the patience, and nor did I really have the passion for the sciences, at least the hard sciences. So I was in college, and I took a psych course as a sophomore, and I just fell in love with it, and I knew to do what I wanted to do, I had to go on, and so I really kind of gunned the engines, got it together in college, and then got into grad school, into a doctoral program, and then just drove it. And then when I came out, I went to University of Pennsylvania, did my internship in a counseling center, the college counseling center. So I got a lot of good sense of late adolescent issues, which was really helpful. Sure. And then actually when I started my career, I was with a group practice where I did a lot of child adolescent work. And then after that, I ended up doing some work in geriatrics, actually, for a hospital for 5 years, but did my private practice on the side, where I did work with mostly children, adolescents, families, couples. So what I'm really grateful for is that I've had kind of this lifespan, life space continuum, if you will, in my work. I've gotten to see sort of how humans evolve over time, and that's been really helpful. And then even during my career, at times I've always done my work as a psychologist with private practice, but I've also done some marketing research consulting, executive coaching. So I've been in some business settings, and it's really helped me when I see people come in my office, men and women that are in the workforce. So I'm really grateful how it's all come together. But more of my work in the last really 10, 15 years has been focused on defiant children. And a lot of that, really, the impetus came from my own struggles as a parent.
Really?
Yeah. I was overly reactive. I was over the top. I didn't have the patience, and I was way too controlling. And I just found that did not work. In fact, it made things worse when my children were having a lot of issues. So
that is true. That is true.
Can I just say, kudos to you. Do you know how many people approach that problem and say, we got to fix that kid?
Yeah.
And you took the mirror and you picked it up. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
Well, the mirror was held up to me actually by one of my kids many years ago, when she said, I have 3 children and I have a son in the middle, and they're all older now in their late teens and 20s. But one of my daughters said, Dad, you have anger issues. I can't believe you try to help people and you're screaming at us. I thought, wow, okay, it's time to eat a big, big helping of humble pie right now. And I did. And so that really kind of got me thinking about it. And then I actually had a day, I can tell you if you'd like, about the birth of 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
really came with the heart and soul of the book, which I call being calm, firm, and non-controlling, which if you have to boil it down, if you want a takeaway point, no one likes to be told what to do.
No. Right.
I just don't meet anybody that really likes being told what to do, especially in a bullying kind of way, which a lot of times we do as parents, wittingly or unwittingly. One day I was picking my children up from their mom's house. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't work out and they were younger. And at the time they were, I want to say something like 7, 9, and 11. And I went to pick them up. And so my oldest daughter comes down and she was kind of moody and gets in the car like many kids are when they're in transition from one house to the other. That's when there's often a lot of acting out. And of course, this can go on and does go on quite a bit in intact families too. Defiance is very non-selective. It hits everywhere.
Right.
Animal, economic, groups, everything. So basically what happened was my oldest was in the car. She was having some attitude. And then my son walked down. And as my youngest was getting into the car, my son pushed her and pretty hard into the car, not like abuse,
Yeah.
but, caught her off guard. So she did what younger siblings do, which is start to freak out and cry.
Of course.
So now I have the 3 of them in the car. And it's almost like a scene from the movie Little Miss Sunshine. I don't know if you saw it, but Pandemonium, one of my favorite movies. And basically, I turned to my son and I said, and you will apologize to her right now. And he looked at me, and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm trying to crane my neck back, my head back, and he said, make me.
Right.
Oh.
Now, I used to live in a very rural area, and I always had these fantasies of taking them out to the cornfields and, teaching them a lesson. Because a lot of us as parents, we don't want to really admit it sometimes, how frustrated we get when our ego mind takes over,
Right.
how we get sucked in. But I had this incredible epiphany. I really did. I heard those words, and I heard my oldest in the front seat saying, Dad, aren't you going to do something? And my youngest right next to him crying and hamming it up and upset. And I just kind of stopped. And I didn't just go into my reflexive anger mode. I had this thought. I took a breath, and this is going to sound crazy, but I imagined myself suspended on the ceiling on the roof of the car, looking down.
It's not crazy.
And when I did that, it allowed, thank you, Deb, because at the time I thought it was, but the more I look back, I realized it's sanity.
Yes.
And it's a way to get sanity. And I watched him working me, and I watched myself wanting to react and get into that tug-of-war type level, and fuel the conflict. And I turned and I said something that I never really said like this before. I said, Sam, this is my son's name, I'm asking you, please, to apologize to your sister. But you know what? I can't make you. I know you're better than this, though. So that was calm in my tone. Firm, because discipline, disciple to teach. I was trying to teach and coach. But I was non-controlling. And that blend of calm, firm, non-controlling is really the heart of the book. And that's what I'm really, really, with humility, proud of, because it came from pain.
Sure.
It came from my pain, and it came from all the years I had seen parents in my office overly react to these children. It's not to say it's all the parents' fault, but we have to set the tone. And if you have an adult temper tantrum, which is basically yelling and threatening and intimidating, how is that going to be teaching and guiding?
Exactly. Yep.
So here was the magical part. I said it, and I let it go, and I tried not to be attached to the result. Of course, I was a little bit, but I tried not to be. 5 minutes later, as I'm driving, I hear from the back seat, fine, sorry, Gabby. Not as remorseful. And this is where a lot of parents fall down because they get so called, well, you're not showing true remorse.
Yeah.
I realized he wanted to save a little face. He was hurting too. Some other stuff going on in his life. So I said, you know what, Sam, not as warm as I would have liked, but thank you. And then that was a real turning point for me.
Sure.
Amazing, powerful. And then later in the weekend, my youngest walked up and tried to provoke him. He walked up to her and cocked a fist. And I said, Sam, please. And he let it go. Now, did they ever have kind of mix-ups and tussles and stuff after that? Of course they did. But it was really a pivotal point for me, and I learned. And ever since then, I'm proud to say I'm not perfect, but I've really done very little, if any, yelling. And if I do feel that urge, I'll name it. I'll say, there's a part of me right now that wants to yell, wants to act immature, and I don't think it's going to help you. Certainly not going to help me. So then I create that empathetic bond that, I'm your parent. I'm still your parent, but I'm keeping it real. I'm a human who struggles too, and I need your help because let's work together. So that's really sort of the guiding philosophy of 10 days to a less defiant child. And the point I want to make is this calm, firm, non-controlling approach is really a mindset. Now, there's a lot of strategies in the program, such as that exercise I just mentioned. I even have that in the book about suspend yourself on the ceiling.
Right.
But which people seem to really value that. But that's really, it's the mindset, because you can have a lot of strategies, but if you don't have a guiding mindset, the strategies are not going to work.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the story that led up to all of your work that created that book.
Right.
It's a great story, and I'm one that I know many parents can really relate to.
Right.
I mean, I don't consider myself a huge yeller, but I yelled at my kids when they were growing up for sure.
Right.
And
We all do.
I always regretted it, and I wished I had another way. I wished I had known then what I know now.
Sure.
Right.
And so it's great to be able to share this with people while their kids are still younger so that they can change those patterns before they become daily struggles.
Absolutely. I think, I have two boys too. So I certainly, like Deb, I wasn't a big yeller, but when I did, and it wasn't appropriate, when I was just simply frustrated myself or tired or stressed out, and I would yell and way out of proportion to what they were doing, I would always apologize. Say, you know what, I'm really stressed out. And that wasn't really a good choice on my part to yell like that. And but this is what I want you to do, just, similar to what you did. I think if every parent can sort of take that slice of humble pie, like you said, and just say, I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. It's okay. And I can learn some tools to be a better parent. And they're not huge shifts. They're little, right? It's like a little thing makes this mess.
Yeah.
It's so amazing how a little thing, even something as, I think as parents, sometimes we forget to say please and thank you.
Absolutely.
As much as we could. Even doing that is amazing. When kids come in my office, some of the most defiant kids, I try never to be deferential. I always try to have I'm legitimately here to try to help you and your family, but I'm also really courteous, and I try to be respectful. And I usually start out with, hey, you know what? Tell me what this child is doing well, or your teenager. Let's hear the good stuff, because often the recognition, the praise, the using good manners from parents, we tend to let that go by the wayside when we're in pain and we're scared. And in support of the parents, there's fear. I mean, there's fear. We're in an increasingly competitive world. I might have a parent come in and, had told me they lost a sibling to a drug overdose, or somebody in their family struggling, and they don't want their child to, quote unquote, turn out like a person who really struggles. So I also try to really join with the parents, because it is scary. Sometimes it's like standing on a cliff when you're a parent, and your arms are stretched out, and you're hoping that a big wind doesn't come at the wrong time, because we'd like to think we have control, and we do our best, but we want certainty in an uncertain world.
Right.
We're not going to get it. So we do.
The only thing we can control is ourselves.
Right.
We can't control the other people.
And so one thing I also talk about in the program, in the book, is that when parents name their anxiety, I see this particularly around schoolwork. Parents who are micromanaging, they're controlling their kids, and they, did you do this? Did you do that? I just went on the portal on the internet and I saw that you didn't do this. And, the kid I see is just shutting down and just getting so frustrated. And it really is helpful when parents can turn around and say, look, I'm scared. I see that this didn't get turned in, or that didn't get turned in, or I know your teacher was frustrated. And I'm concerned that when I'm scared, when I'm anxious, it comes off as controlling and pushing you. That just changes up the dynamic so much. It really does. It creates, again, this empathetic bond, and it helps the child have a role model that it's okay to be aware of feelings and to express them and to talk about them.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I have just hearing you say that made me bristle a little bit, because this is my, just spitting out my reaction of, is it okay to drop that much pretense? I don't know, in front of your child, because you don't want them to feel fearful that they're living with, oh great, nobody's in charge here, nobody's feeling strong and confident. If they're scared about my grades and I'm scared about my grades, do you know what I mean? Like, where's that level of security that a kid gets from their parents kind of being
In charge.
Yeah, calm, firm, and non-controlling.
I like the question. That's really good. And here's what I'd say to that. We communicate not only through our words, but through our actions. And presumably, hopefully, if the parent is going to meet the teacher day, going to parent-teacher conferences, is involved on a daily level, hopefully that child just from that is seeing, my parent is showing up, my parent's involved. But if I have my parent breathing down my neck and micromanaging me and that turns me off, that's not helpful.
Right.
So hopefully the parent saying, look, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm struggling, I'm concerned, whatever word more fits the personality style, I think it's not really in any way eroding the sense of comfort and strength. I think hopefully what they're modeling is being vulnerable.
Being real, authentic.
Being real is a source of strength, because if we deny this problem and if we swim in this big river in Egypt called denial, right? Right? If we swim in that river, and I've seen that happen in my practice over and over. So if you say you're scared, it actually gives you a bridge to be able to talk about it, versus the kid just continuing to lie and resist,
right?
Because they're coming up with excuses for every question. I think we have to balance it, though. We still have to be parents. We still have to wear an executive of the family role. Hopefully we do that in our actions. We bring things up and we offer possible solutions. Look, you may want to consider that when you come home, maybe that is a better time to study. Tell me what you think. Yeah. Okay, I hear that you like to have some TV in the background. Let's try that. Let's go back to trying that. Particularly, I'm thinking for a child who has ADHD and maybe does a little better. Not all, but some with background noise. So you can still be a problem solver.
Yeah.
You can still initiate that piece, but being vulnerable, I think, will create the emotional safety for kids to open up.
And not to mention, right, I mean, no matter where you're at in life, no matter how successful you are, no matter what you're doing, we're always going, I'm not really sure what the next step is. I'm not really sure how to get to the next place that I want to be. You're constantly in that, and you don't want your kids to think that suddenly they're going to get to some place where they know everything. And they don't have any questions anymore, and they don't have any doubts about themselves or fears about how to move forward, but they're going to charge forward and figure it out, and that's the spirit you want your kid to have, right? I'm going to figure it out.
Well, and I think we want to keep going back to, look, if you do what you have to do in life, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's getting through school, whether it's preparing for a sporting event, a team, it comes down to execution, right? You have to do the fundamentals. But sometimes we get a little scared. Sometimes we get knocked off course. Sometimes we question ourselves. And it's okay to do that, but we still have to do the work. The whole plan of this book really is based on two important skills that I say kiddingly, right, and not so kiddingly, are the two most crucial skills we all need as human beings, right? So now, hopefully, everybody's like, what is that?
What are they? What are they?
Yeah. I say, of course, there's many answers to this question, but what I believe, you could say it's good communication. You could say, it's the ability to be vulnerable. All those count. But what I say, the two most crucial skills that we need to teach our children and live every day, one, the ability to calm down, especially in this world with how fast it's moving with social media, electronic communication. So calming down and solving problems. And if we as parents can live that and model that, then I think we're never going to lose our parent hat. We can add a coach hat to it. We can add, and this is a really important driver of the approach to lower defiance, by the way. I've never had an adult come in my office, because this is one of the best ways that I think I've become fairly knowledgeable, right? I'm always learning. The more I know, the less I know. But to be able to work with children and teens, right, I have to really think about what do I know and what makes for effective support of them.
Right.
So sometimes listening to the retrospectives of adults keeps me, even though times have changed, some things just haven't changed.
Right.
Like this, that I've never had an adult come in my office and say, you know what really messed up my childhood was that my parents took too much time to understand me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They took too much time to really get me. Usually I hear the opposite.
They never understood. Right.
Huh?
They never understood me.
They never, which of course is often a distortion, but they certainly didn't understand me as much as I would have liked them to, or I felt like at the time when I was a kid that they never did.
Yeah.
And that, you can't go wrong with leading with understanding. And I know so often as parents, we go off on these soliloquies and these lectures and these life lessons, which I'm all about giving knowledge, but our kids need to feel safe to be able to hear. It's almost like if you're going to water the plants outside and the soil's really hard, you need to kind of moisten it a little bit and then kind of water again so that it penetrates.
Doesn't dribble off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, it doesn't just trickle off.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say understanding, as basic as that sounds, needs to really be a big part of lowering defiant behavior in children. M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled, love him. He had said something to the effect of, if we listen to our children with the level of intensity that we would listen to a great lecturer, what a gift.
Yeah.
Today, in this world, and I've been guilty of it, of having a mobile device in our hand and getting distracted, we really need to be vigilant about how we listen.
Yeah, that's
Totally.
present. I'm looking at the time, and there are two things I still would love to get into, and maybe we only have time for one right now. And one is what actually causes some kids to be more oppositional or defiant. And then the other thing is you've got this whole book about toxic thoughts. Maybe we just have you back to talk about that at some point.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
No, well, as far as the roots of defiance, depending on what you read, some would say that up to 50% of defiant behavior, kids who have what's called ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, right? And by the way, it's a continuum. There's different levels of defiant behavior. You don't have to have the full-blown disorder. A lot of the kids, or 50%, would have ADHD, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I think that's a fairly high estimate, but probably there's a good chunk of children who maybe have some kind of neurological issue, which ADHD is, some psychiatric issue, depression, anxiety, emotional stress. Some kids have just a very strong personality. They're very willful. That's kind of how they're born.
Their MO.
That's right. That's their MO. And sometimes you have parents that can really kind of fan the flames. Often that's the case of what could be some born with, if you will, tendency to be defiant. But when the parents, what I've seen in 25 years is when the parents offer these harsh consequences that are often so disproportionate, so over the top. When they yell and they're reactive, and again, I'm not trashing the parents. The parents are in pain. I'm a parent myself. We know how hard it is. I think that's the kind of combustible combination that the child has some predisposed tendency toward the parent style, right? Or parents who are overly permissive, that they don't set any boundaries or any limits, and the kids think and know that they can get away with pretty much anything. So that's really
the thing that I kind of notice the most, or maybe that's the people that I pick up on is people that I think are not strong in their parenting skills,
right.
Say, or so that's where I kind of see the defiance showing up.
Right.
And so I get really irritated with this adults or the set of adults saying, you're not making life any easier for this person. This person's going to have a very hard road on every school situation or every job situation, every friendship situation. You have got to help this person grow. And you're falling down on the job.
Right. Well, and we always heard the adage, right? Teacher, I'll make it gender neutral, but teach a person to fish. And give a person a fish, they have dinner. Teach a person to fish, and they'll never go hungry.
Right.
So it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Totally.
you want to provide structure and not just be too permissive. But certainly what I see is a lot of parents who get very reactive, they micromanage, they yell,
Yeah.
a lot of yelling, and a lot of lectures, a lot of how many times do I have to tell you kind of stuff. It's funny, one time I was walking through a parking lot at a mall, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught a guy talking to his girlfriend, must have been young 20s, and I saw him speak to her, and he said, how many times do I have to tell you? And I thought, where did this kid learn how to talk like that? That's certainly not going to help foster a lot of emotional safety
With
in
that
his relationship.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
right, totally.
Set up when he's married. As far as the toxic thinking model and liking the child you love, really where that came from, my first book was Why Can't It Read My Mind? And that was about couples and how in intimate relationships are a fertile breeding ground because we feel vulnerable and anxious to sometimes go toxic. You never think of me. You always think of yourself. You're lazy. You're selfish. You just bounce a check. You're going to put us in the poorhouse. I can't count on you for anything. All those kind of real, kind of extreme, distorted thoughts where we make these very unfair, uncharitable judgments of our intimate partners or our spouses.
Yeah.
So that was the whole toxic thinking model that I introduced in my first book, Why Can't You Read My Mind? Then I wrote on Defiant Children. My last book, well, I just revised 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child, but the book before that was Liking the Child You Love. And that, being very straight up with you, that really didn't sell as much as I would have liked. 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child and the others were better. And I think people were scared of the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Liking the Child You Love, it resonates with a lot of people.
But they didn't want to pick it up.
Yeah, they don't have it.
Or they don't want other people to see them checking out with it, or they didn't want their kid to see it maybe laying around. Now, I'm very grateful that book had some phenomenal reviews from Aaron, from Judy Beck at University of Pennsylvania, and it really did. And I really liked the content and the concept. So I still promote that now, and I've kind of infused that into the latest version of 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child. But the whole premise of that is, we get these toxic thoughts toward our own children, and are we allowed to? You're sucking this family dry.
Yeah.
Nothing I do is enough for you. Now, parents need to be aware of these thoughts because sometimes we can be moody, passive aggressive, and parents don't want to talk about this. We can provoke our children. This dark side of us comes over. So that's the whole premise. If we can really understand these kind of negative, twisted, toxic thoughts that we get at times because we're human toward our own children, then we can replace them and extinguish them. Look, I know he's really being difficult, but he does have ADHD and it's challenging for him. Or I can't imagine right now that him not turning in assignments has him feeling or her feeling really good about themselves. Or, you know what, I see right now the more he yells, the more scared and anxious he really is.
Right.
The more that it's all about reframing.
Reframing
is key. Yep.
Reframing.
That's great. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately, because this is
Wow,
fast.
so fast.
I know, fast, doesn't it? Go ahead. You just told us the names of all of your books. Do you have any other projects or speaking engagements or anything
Where can we
else?
find you online?
Yeah, and online, drjeffonline.com. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So again, the books are Why Can't You Read My Mind, the couple's book, and then 10 Days to a Less Defiant Child, which is newly revised, 2015. Do want to add that it has a lot on social media and setting limits and boundaries and screen time considerations and text messaging, defiance, and all those kind of things that we're now facing. And then 10 Days to a Less Distracted Child, which is for a lot of kids with issues at school and ADHD and not being able to focus and liking the child you love. Which is about the toxic thoughts. So those have kept me pretty busy. Yeah. My clinical practice keeps me busy. And I'm always open to doing lectures, and I've got them kind of on a local basis right now. I'm not doing
Philadelphia, right?
I'm sorry?
You're in Philadelphia, right?
I'm in the greater Philadelphia area. Yeah. So that's really keeps me very, very active. I'm very grateful to be in an area of my practice where I've been pretty busy. I also do phone coaching, so if anybody is interested, I don't do like extended psychotherapy, but when parents need some coaching specific to the content of the books, I do like a 1 to 3 session model to give them a boost, and then I'm here at times, and it's kind of an adjunct. It's a supplement to any counseling or mental health needs that they may get where they live locally. So
That's great. That's great.
That's great.
Well, thank you so much. This is Dr. Jeffrey Bernstein. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we really learned lots of great information
So
about
great. Thank you so much.
defiant children and how to relate to kids better. So everyone, this is Mighty Married Moms. My name is Debbie Owen from You Can Raise Great Kids.
I'm Linda Tighe from All Well Breaks Loose.
And I'm Wendy Williams from connectagain.org.
And we would really love to have you go to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. And please share us with your friends so that they too can get the benefit of our guests' wisdom. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Mighty Married Moms. Tune in twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays to meet fascinating and inspiring guests who will help you create the life you've always wanted.
You can find these episodes and special gifts just for you at mightymarriedmoms.com, as well as a link to our Facebook community,
where we continue the conversation around the kitchen table. Please also help share the love by leaving a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.